Okay, so have you ever thought about all the different ways that businesses can get money? I mean, like beyond the usual bank loans. There are all these like hidden gems out there. And today we're going to do a deep dive into one that might be especially useful for manufacturers.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people, especially if they're not, deep in the finance world, don't realize how many options are really out there.
Right. It's got a whole secret menu of financing. And this one is called factoring.
Factoring, yeah. It's not about getting a loan exactly.
It's not.
No, it's more like, you're a manufacturer, right? You make something awesome, you send out your invoices, and then you kind of have to wait.
Oh, yeah. The waiting game. Tell me about it.
Right. So factoring is like fast forwarding through that waiting period. It's like selling your receivables, those outstanding invoices, to a company that specializes in this. They give you cash up front, a big chunk of what you're owed.
So instead of just twiddling my thumbs while I wait to get paid, I could actually use that money to, order more materials, get things moving, maybe even treat myself to a celebratory latte. I'm just saying.
Exactly. I mean, who doesn't love a latte?
Right. But Chris Ianus, the guy we're looking at today, he calls himself a factoring specialist. And in one of his videos, he seems really into factoring specifically for manufacturers.
Yeah.
Why is that? What's the connection there?
Well, he makes this really interesting point about how manufacturers, they often have these really predictable income streams, right? And they've usually got established clients, people who are going to pay their bills.
Makes sense. It's not like they're making, unicorn cupcakes.
Yeah.
One day they're hot, the next they're not.
Exactly. So for a factoring company that's like gold, they know they're going to get their money back. So
Yeah.
it means manufacturers are more likely to qualify for good rates and better terms, all that stuff.
Yeah. So it's less risky for the factoring company. Interesting. But okay, let's get down to brass tacks. How does this actually work in real life? If I'm a manufacturer and I decide, hey, factoring, this sounds like my jam, what's the process look like?
Okay, so typically you'd send your invoices to the factoring company. They'll look them over, make sure everything's legit, and then boom, they'll advance you a percentage of that invoice amount.
Okay, so not the full amount right away, just a chunk of it.
Right, usually something like 80%, but it can vary. And then they take over the job of collecting the full payment from your customer. They deal with all that back and forth.
Okay, so less work for me. That's always a plus. But I have a feeling there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
What are the costs involved here? What's the catch?
Well, you are right. There are fees involved.
Yeah.
It's usually a percentage of the invoice value, maybe 2% to 5%, something like that. But it really depends on a few things, like the size of the invoice, who your customer is, their creditworthiness, the terms you work out with the factoring company. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
Okay, so definitely some numbers to crunch. If I've got this huge order coming in, but I need to buy a mountain of raw materials, like right now, factoring might be the way to go. But if it's a smaller invoice and I know the client's good for it, maybe I just wait it out. Ride the wave.
Exactly. It's about picking the right tool for the job.
I love that analogy. It's like you wouldn't use a hammer to spread butter.
Precisely. And Chris, he actually talks about certain situations where factoring can be super helpful. Like if you're just starting out and haven't built up a ton of cash reserves yet, or if you're, going through a rough patch, or even if your business is growing so fast that your current cash flow just can't keep up, it's like a bridge. Gets you where you need to go.
Okay, so it's a tool for specific situations.
Gotcha.
But beyond the fees,
Yeah.
what other potential downsides should people be aware of? Are there any red flags to watch out for?
Yeah, definitely. One thing to think about is that you might lose a little control over your customer relationships because now the factoring company is the one doing the collecting. And, that could potentially impact how your customers see your business. So it's really important to do your homework and choose a factoring company that, they've got a good reputation, they treat your customers well, all that good stuff.
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about getting the money. It's about maintaining those relationships that you've built.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you don't want to hand that over to just anyone.
Exactly.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Overall, factoring seems like it could be a really valuable tool for some manufacturers, but definitely requires some careful consideration.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So what's the next step for our listeners?
Yeah.
What should they do if they're thinking, hey, maybe factoring is right for me?
Well, the best thing you can do is do your own research, right? Look into different providers, see what their terms are like, and don't be afraid to negotiate, to get the best deal for your business. Information is power.
Totally agree. And hey, even if factoring isn't the right move for you right now,
Yeah.
just knowing about it expands your options,
Yeah.
right? Like now you've got this whole other tool in your toolbox to think about when you're making financial decisions. That's got to be worth something.
Right. It absolutely is. And it makes you think, what could you do in your business if you had immediate access to that cash? How would that change things? What doors could it open?
Ooh, I like that, leaving our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Very nice.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But as always, thanks for joining us, and keep those entrepreneurial brains buzzing.